Of all the golf facilities in the United States, and there's just under 16,000, 73%, almost three quarters, are open to the public. And then it has golf tourism expenditures of $31 billion. You want to fly down to, like I said, Myrtle Beach or Florida or Arizona or wherever you go in the wintertime, or where you want to go and play golf, Pinehurst, or you go up to Boyne in Michigan, et cetera. $31 billion in terms of that. So I wanted that as a baseline so that we understand how massive the golf industry is. And the numbers that I just gave you, save for the percentage of charitable contributions that the tour does provide, all of those other economic data that I gave you, by and large, is the industry at large. That's how big the golf industry is. For example, I'll give you some examples. The running shoes industry in the United States is $48 billion. Pet supplies in the United States, right? Everybody's got pets. They're a member of the family. Pet supply business in the United States is about the same size of that direct economic impact of golf. You would assume with a country with 330-something million people that in everybody having pets, that pet supplies would eclipse the golf industry. It doesn't. That's how big the golf industry is. That's how important the golf industry is as an economic vehicle. And it's the reason why in May, We Are Golf, this coalition of the industry, comes together. It includes the Golf Course Superintendent Association, includes the Golf Course Owners Association. They get together in Washington, D.C. to try to meet with the politicians to say, stop. If you're still harboring thoughts somewhere in your heart and your mind that golf is somehow a hot potato politically, then spare us that, please, because it is employing millions of Americans in generating many, many, many billions of dollars directly to the U.S. economy. It's a critically important part of the U.S. economy. And again, as I keep saying and will reiterate throughout, that comes down to you guys. You guys are truly the fuel that drives that engine. Without it, it wouldn't exist. The drop down that Andrew just put in there shows you what golf's reach is now. And that's another discussion that I'm going to get into in terms of how golf measures itself, because until relatively recently, it was woeful in terms of how it measured itself against anything else. You name it. If you have something that is, as I call it, an economic engine, it's going to be up against other economic engines. And back in the day, golf, by its own definition, measured itself by participation. And it was on-course participation, which we'll get into today. So the game was measured at roughly, at the time, 24 million. And people would look at that and harumph and go, please. Dom, you could tell me, I know you can pull up these numbers quicker than I can, but back in the day when the comparison would make, people would laugh and go, please, golf, 24 million. NASCAR is 75 million, right? How many people watch the Super Bowl? 120 some odd million people, right? And I look at that and go, there's two problems here. One is golf is being mismeasured because you're not measuring the game based upon total consumption. Total consumption. You're basing it on one metric. Whereas you're comparing it to a sport that's using every metric. Seriously, when was the last time anybody you know drove a stock car? When was the last time the vast majority of people that watched the Super Bowl, and I'm talking US based these numbers, when was the last time any of them threw a football? There was some percentage, and it's probably higher than those that drove a stock car, going to the beach or what have you. Get it. What I'm saying to you is that when you talk about total consumption, and Andrew, you can pull back up that chart. When you talk about total consumption, it has to include all touch points in terms of how someone consumes the sport of golf. For example, over 100 million people watched golf. 66 million consumed it. They read about it. That could be a book, it could be in newspapers, could be online, but they read. 50 million specifically sought out and followed the game on social media. And then 45 million, that's the combo number, which I'm going to get into in a little bit here this morning, consume the golf with a club in hand in terms of how that is defined. Yeah, Dom, go ahead. Let's take a look at the other sport number. Tell me about the other sport numbers.
Well, I'm just going to share with you some of the fan numbers. Forgive me, I've got like 7 screens. I'm looking all over the place. It makes me laugh because of the comparisons that you're making. These are global numbers. Volleyball, 900 million fans. Table tennis, 850 million. Basketball, 800 million. Like, when was the last time you had a ping pong match? It's probably been a while.
Right, but that's okay. They're measuring themselves correctly. I'm saying golf used to not measure themselves correctly.
That's my point. I'm saying these are the numbers we're up against. Meanwhile, golf 10 years ago was saying, it's 20 million. We're doing great.
Well, if you're going to compare golf on a global basis, though, golf on a global basis is bigger than, I'm going to say the NFL, but the NFL is bigger than just that. It's football, but American football, because football is also football around the rest of the world, which is soccer, right? And golf is above it on the global scale of sports. Total consumption. So what I'm trying to do is provide a baseline here so that we all understand who and what golf is. And there are so many different elements to it. And again, this came out of yesterday's discussion and the massive response we got from people going, I guess, all of a sudden going, when you think about it, we are vesting so much energy and emotion to a certain point, because then people start to fall off and go, you know what, I'm just going to wait till they figure it out. With golf at its highest competitive tiers, yet the game is booming everywhere else. It's the reason why I've advised caution. I don't have a problem with the R&A and the USGA looking at equipment and going, no, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years down the road, we have to make sure that we have regulations in place so that the equipment doesn't outpace the game in terms of the golf courses, footprints, et cetera, any way you want to define that. But the caution that I'm having in there is that if you make hard and fast rules now based upon what the 0.1% are doing at the highest tier of the game and apply those regulations and rules to 100% of the game, then I think you're running the risk of the same thing that we're talking about and everything else, is forgetting who the 99.99% are that are the fuel that drives the entire rest of the industry. So I guess what my theory is here is that the amount of time, the amount of emotional investment, even at times financial investment when it comes to things like I was just mentioning, is too much of an emotional and financial investment for the tiniest percentage of the game. They'll work it out. They'll figure it out. And it's a great source of entertainment. But what I'm underscoring here is it doesn't represent the true game of golf. The true game of golf is actually represented by all of you, which is why I always ask you the question, who represents your interests? Who speaks for you at golf's highest tiers?